All right. And here we go. So we're going to pin Kevin. All right. So hello, everybody, and welcome to another summer 2023 cheer interviews. And today I'll be interviewing Kevin Chua, and he is gonna be entering his freshman year at Yale. Hello, Kevin. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah,
Of course, thank you for inviting me. I had a bit of trouble connecting my audio just now, but I hope you can hear me.
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you.
Yeah, and so Kevin, could you just please give us just like a short, brief little introduction to yourself?
All right. As Max has already said, I'm 17 years old and I'm an incoming freshman at Yale. Um, and I'm from North Hollywood High School. So I've been in Los Angeles for the whole of my life. And yeah.
All right, so let's get right into it. So, Kevin, um, so throughout high school, what were your favorite parts and how do you think you made the most out of your high school experience?
Right. So for me, my favorite parts of high school are really the extracurricular activities. So like in high school for me, sorry, in middle school, I didn't have much of an opportunity to stay after school and do all these kind of like clubs or events that I did in high school. So in high school, the two main after school events that I committed myself to were cross country and science Olympiad. So cross country, it's because it's an athletic sport, it's pretty intensive. So there's practice every single day. I wasn't able to show up every day because I had other commitments, but I would try my best. And it was really fun to be able to run with a group of friends, especially your peers. And it keeps you healthy, but it also, I don't know, it gives you a reason to, exercise. And that was really important for me. Like my health is very important to me. Um, the other activity that I devoted my time to was Science Olympiad. And for me, Science Olympiad was really fun. I didn't know about it at first in my freshman year, but how I made the most of my high school experience was mainly by talking to my friends, also my peers that I may not have known as well, for just asking about what they were doing. So one of my best friends told me that she was doing Science Olympiad, and I thought that was maybe something that I was interested in, especially being in the STEM field. So I decided to give it a go, and I ended up being a part of the build division for all 4 years of my high school career, and it was great. You get to see after school, woodwork, and compete in competitions, and it's really fun being in just that environment with your high school friends, basically doing all that. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, sounds great. Yeah, so many activities. So, with all those activities in high school, how were you able to manage your time just throughout all those activities in high school?
Right. So managing time is one of the most difficult things you will encounter in high school, but also past that. But I can talk about my experience from what I've just gone through for the past 4 years. So really, especially my freshman year, I had to try a bunch of different activities, a bunch of different clubs. Like I tried out speech and debate for a little bit. Um, just a bunch of different clubs and activities, especially lunch clubs, since you have more flexibility with that. And with all these extracurriculars, it becomes hard to manage your time. But one thing I found really useful is after maybe the first few months of freshman year, you sort of just have to sit yourself down and think about what you really think you're going to commit yourself to for the next 3 to 4 years of your high school career. You need to think about what you enjoy doing and where you see yourself in the future, because commitment is one of the most important things for your college application. They want to see that growth, but like a continued growth, not chopped up, right? So my biggest tip for time management is just to evaluate what you're spending time on, and maybe it's okay to limit things. Like it's okay to drop out of maybe one extracurricular that you're not too fond of. Like personally, I wasn't very into speech and debate. I'm not much of a talker, like a confident talker. So I didn't see myself staying there for all 4 years, but I found my place. So yeah.
All right. Thanks for the advice. So, moving on more personally, how and when did you discover your passion for both computer science and psychology?
All right. So just a little bit of background for everybody. At Yale, my current major that I have selected is computer science and psychology. So it's not a double major, it's a joint major. So I only have to do one senior thesis at the end of my 4th year, but I incorporate both the subjects of computer science and psychology. During high school, it was a pretty long process to come to this conclusion. It was also very last minute of choosing this major. But the biggest deciding factor for me were the classes I took in high school. I took both AP Psychology and AP Computer Science A, and they both sort of showed they demonstrated what kind of interests I had. So especially because COVID happened to me in the spring semester of my 9th grade, and that was a very tough time for everybody, as we all know. And that point was probably when I started prioritizing my own health, especially my mental health, and worrying about issues and discovering sort of like the science behind psychology and all that. And that really intrigued me. So after that, I took AP psychology and I found myself to really enjoy the class. So that's where the psychology component comes in. And for computer science, um, similar story. I took APCSA. I really enjoyed coding with Java in class. And as we all know, computers are a part of our future, and it's gonna revolutionize practically every field. So I wanted to sort of keep my knowledge and my major sort of future proofed, right? So I also wanted to learn about that. Um, Now, for most schools, I applied as a cognitive science major because that's more of an interdisciplinary field, and I liked the concept of going into cognitive science because you can sort of pick and choose from a lot of different subjects like neuroscience, psychology, um, statistics. But Yale has a special joint major, like I said earlier, computer science and psychology, and it was just a good fit. It was a great fit.
All right, so adding to that, so why did you choose Yale? And so what other schools were you sort of interested in and why?
That's a really good question, Max. So before my college search, um, coming from California, I it's very competitive, right? So I wasn't sure how much of a shot I had at those like the bigger like the Ivy League or the private schools out of state. So I was mainly focused on in-state schools and especially UCs. So I was thinking of UCLA, UC Berkeley, uh, and also UC San Diego too, because they have a outstanding cognitive science program. I just want to say that right now. I love UC San Diego. But um, wait, sorry, Max, what was the question again?
Yeah, so why did you choose Yale specifically
Oh,
and what were some other colleges that you were interested in why?
okay, thank you. So for everybody, especially if you're applying to college, maybe this year or in 2 years, I think one of the biggest things you will notice is that once you start applying to colleges, you learn a lot about them through research, but also the application itself. It sort of speaks to you. It depends. Every college asks different questions, right? And for me, the Yale application really spoke to me. You can search it up. It's probably on the Common Application or even on I'm going to plug in collegeessayguy.com. He has a great website with supplementals from like almost every college. And you just sort of you can get a vibe from the school just by its application. Yale has a application with the Common App essay, the longer one, and also shorter supplementals. And the unique thing about Yale for me that made me really enjoy it was that they had a lot of 35 word prompts, like 2 sentence prompts, like really short, really fast. And you sort of, when you know you connect well and you're able to sort of easily get an idea of how you're going to answer an application question, you know it's a good fit already. But also, even before that, when I was researching majors, I knew that Yale had the computer science and psychology program. I was already interested. It's a phenomenal school. So I guess you start there. Then you go through applications. You realize if you're a good fit for each school, what you're vibing with. And then after that, eventually we got to interviews. For me, my interview were and I hit it off pretty well. From what I've talked about with my classmates, you don't have to have an outstanding interview to get into a school. Sometimes you and your interview are from different backgrounds, and that just happens, and you don't have much to relate to each other. But I was able to, one thing you should do in an interview is always at the end, ask the interviewer about their experience at the college and maybe some of your concerns, like how dorming situation is or how prerequisite classes are and how many you need to take. So I asked a bunch of questions and I realized that we have a distributional requirement system. So we don't have core curriculum and we don't have open curriculum or somewhere in between. And that kind of semi-flexible curriculum where I can choose which science class to take, but I have to choose a science class, but you get to choose like out of many of which ones you want to take. That really spoke to me. So there's, I guess, the three components of knowing if, for me, knowing Yale was right for me was research in the beginning, just about academics, but also everything else like extracurriculars, location, then going into the application processing, the supplemental essays, and then lastly, the interview. Those three components probably made up how I knew Yale was the one for me.
All right. So building off of that again, so what did you think overall of the application process for colleges? Like, was it stressful? Did you procrastinate a lot or a little? Just overall, your general opinion on it.
The application process is definitely one of the most difficult things you will do in your high school career. It's not impossible, clearly, but for me, it was really difficult, especially because of procrastination, like you mentioned, Max. I probably started my college application journey at the end of the spring semester of my junior year. At that point, I started to look at UC and Common App essay prompts, and I maybe jotted down some bullet point ideas. And I was working with my English teacher at the time. She sort of guided us through, so I'm very grateful for that. But then over summer, I didn't really think about it as much because I was a bit afraid, right? And I didn't really want to think about the whole application process. So I sort of put it aside. And then when school started again in senior year in the fall, um, I sort of had to rush to get things over with. So if I had advice, please start your essays early and always keep it in mind. But even if you don't, even if you have a gap, it's still possible to get your essays done somewhat quickly, but it does require a lot of thought. So for me, because I procrastinated a little bit, I had to do my UC application essays first since they're due earlier. I don't quite remember what day they're due, but they're due before December. Most private schools were due end of December, early January. The UC schools are probably 1 or 2 months before that. So the UC schools have 4 PIQs for the whole system. They don't have any individual essays, so you just submit the same 4 essays to all the schools. And they have 8 prompts, I think. You choose 4 out of 8. At least that's how it was for me. And I sort of went through and thought about what my answer would be for each prompt and which one spoke to me the most. Something important, especially about the UC application system, is that you need to sort of vary your essays. So because you can choose 4 different prompts, you should also sort of incorporate 4 different topics with like a shared theme in all 4 essays. Um, so a lot of my time was figuring out which 4 to include, but um, you sort of the one thing that helped me was maybe setting a stopwatch and forcing myself to start writing, just continued writing for like 15 minutes at least. Because I was very afraid, especially staring at a blank page or a page of bullet points to start writing. But if you just force yourself to start writing, you sort of get a clear mind of what you want to write from what you're writing as you write. So just start writing no matter what. It's better than writing it or imagining in your head. After I finished my UC application essays, working with my teachers and my friends, having them proofread it for me, that's when I shifted over to the Common App essay. Everybody else, if you don't procrastinate, you might do it the other way around. You might start with your Common App essay instead. But the Common App essay also has several prompts, but you only choose one out of, I think it's 8 or 9, something like that. Um, for the Common App essay, I took a different approach. Instead of looking through each prompt, like the UC essays or the UC PIQs, I I glanced at them, maybe the Common App prompts, but then I just started writing based on what I wrote in my UC PIQs. I sort of thought about how I wanted to present myself to colleges, and this, because this is the longest essay you will give them of 650 words for private schools, you have a good opportunity to sort of present a larger story in more detail instead of having a bunch of shorter, like 300 word prompts. So with that, I just started writing about my love for journaling. It's one of my favorite hobbies. It keeps me mentally healthy because life gets hard sometimes and you get stressed, but being able to see everything laid out on paper makes me realize that it's not as hard as my brain makes it out to be. So I really enjoy journaling, but basically I just started writing and I wrote about, for me, it was a specific challenge of just overcoming anxiety and just general stress, especially through COVID and having all these assignments come in on my computer. And it just felt endless. So I wrote about how I journaled through that time and how that helped me progress and become a better student and a better human. Some people may think in your Common App essay that you might need to have like a perfect fairy tale ending at the end, but as people, we're always growing. So at the end of my essay, I'm not completely stress free now, right? But you sort of show how you have, as long as you show how you've grown and how you have learned over the past few years of your life, it shows to colleges that you are capable of growth and that you're resilient. And I think that's really important. Um, so that was my Common App essay. For supplementals, you have a lot more flexibility. It's a lot, I feel like it's a lot more fun. Every school, usually, if it's on the Common App, is going to ask you like a why us question. Um, so they're going to ask you what you like. So for Yale, they asked me what I liked about Yale and why I'm a good fit for Yale. So it's important to know that this is like a two-way street. You need to present yourself and explain why you're good for Yale, but also why Yale is a good fit for you. So it goes both ways. And I just talked about how just Yale's philosophy of education spoke to me, their distributional requirements, also how the major fit how I've been living with my passion for journaling. And I haven't mentioned this before, but in I think it was my sophomore year, I sort of took over and rebranded the mental health awareness club of my school. And it's a lunch club. So people might look down on it because it's not a competitive club. We don't have after school meetings, but it was really a blast. I got to work with my friends on amazing like in-school projects. We made posters, we held like school-wide mental health weeks. It was really amazing. But basically, going back to supplemental essays, I was able to sort of incorporate that experience in there. So while my Common App essay may have, it's like one big story, and your supplemental essays give you a chance to talk about other things you've done. And it's really great. Um, oh, sorry. Going back to the why us essay about why Yale's a good fit for me and why I'm a good fit for Yale. So I talked about how my mental health awareness club that I was leading at the time connected to my major of computer science and psychology, and just talked about why Yale is special and why it's just a good fit. Another popular question that colleges will ask is why major essay. So I sort of touched on this before, but you just need to explain why your selected major speaks to you. So for me, similar to what I was just talking about, science and psychology was good for me because of my the experience I experienced during COVID, the club I've been leading, and just the classes I took. You just need to explain things honestly and what you feel like they are. I think that was a lot. So feel free to ask questions. But yeah, that's generally what I did for my essays.
All right. So, can you kind of share us kind of your mentality throughout these college essays? Like, did you have any help? Did you kind of get stuck here and there? Like, what were some big obstacles, like overall in these college essays?
For me, probably one of the biggest obstacles was the common application essay, like the 650 word one, the long one. The reason why that was so hard is because with 650 words, it's a lot of pressure because you have a lot of space to work with and you want it to be like this perfect masterpiece. So at first, sort of, I I did like a funky timeline where I started with the end and then I went back in time to tell the story in chronological order because I thought it would capture the readers or my admission officer's attention by having like a good hook. A good hook is great, but I messed with the timeline too much and it got confusing. And that's when I was able to sort of go to my English teachers, my 11th grade and 12th grade English teachers. They had like college advising sessions to talk about your college essay. So that was great. If your school doesn't have that, just feel free to ask your teacher if you can talk to them after school or during lunch. I'm sure they'd be happy to help, or any other trusted adult. But basically, they explained to me that the my essay was hard to follow, and looking back, I really do agree with them. So I'm very grateful that they helped me on that. But your essay doesn't need to be an English masterpiece. The point of the essay isn't meant to really show that you're like a amazing creative writer with like Shakespeare level skills, but it's just it should read the essay should read how similar or in a little bit more formal than how you talk. So reading your own essay, you should sort of hear yourself speaking it in your own voice with your own character because the admissions team wants to know about your experiences and how resilient and strong you are, but they also want to know how you're about your character, what you value. Like for me, one of my biggest values was taking care of my own health, but also helping others, whether it was through like cross country, um, supporting others to continue coming to meets and continue running and exercising, or if it was helping people with my mental health club with fun crafts that could sort of de-stress us all. So that's what I incorporated into my essays to sort of show my character. But so that's what I think is important. Basically, at first I was too caught up with making it like a good English essay, but it's supposed to be a good you essay. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And so, moving on throughout the application process, how were you able to choose your references for your reference letters?
That's a great question. So for me, well, actually for everybody, you sort of, I think it's a good idea to get your recommendation letters from either 11th or 12th grade. At some point, I did talk to my physics teacher that I had in 10th grade because I loved his class, but it was over Zoom during COVID, so he didn't get to know me quite well. And he explained to me, first of all, that because he didn't get to know me quite well, it wouldn't be a good letter. But secondly, because he was a 10th grade teacher, he sort of just told me that colleges like to see recommendation letters more toward 11th and 12th grade because it's just closer to your application um, process, like when it starts. Having a 10th grade teacher, if you're really close with them, it's perfectly good. It's like really good. But for me, that made me sort of reconsider which teachers knew me the best and which classes I sort of enjoyed the most and that I participated the most in. So participation is really important. For example, I had a chemistry teacher in 11th grade who wrote my letter of rec, and I participated in a lot of projects in his class. He gave us most freedom to do a lot of experiments on our own. So if we were in the like reduction oxidation chapter of chem, he would allow us to just sort of choose any redox reaction we wanted to, and he would help us find the chemicals and supplies needed to conduct that in our own groups. And that kind of process was really good because afterwards, when I had to ask him for a letter of recommendation, first of all, he was very happy to because I participated and I was sort of engaging with the class over time. But secondly, because he had projects and examples to talk about in my performance in class. So for all my letters, for all the teachers I got letter of recommendations from, I would send them a brag sheet just so they can, a brag sheet just outlines all the extracurriculars and maybe like awards you have, right? But it's not the most important thing. It's good for your teacher to know sort of like your background, where you're coming from. But the point of the letter is just to talk about how you're like in the classroom. That's what colleges want to know. So I think it just comes down to how you felt in that classroom and how well you engaged. If you engage the most, the teacher will have more to say. So that's how I got to my letter recommendation choices.
Yeah, well, it seems great to have good teachers. But so moving on, how do you think that or my bad. So, do you have any advice for younger students on just getting a good reference letter in general? Like for me myself, I'm in 10th grade, you know, probably won't really need a reference letter from a teacher in 10th grade, but just overall, how do you have any tips for students?
I think I'm thinking. So just another background information. When you get a letter of rec for college, it's a good idea. You don't have to. But it's a good idea to get 2 or 3 letters of recommendation. I only got 2 from teachers of different subjects. So I got my chemistry teacher to write me one, and I also asked my English teacher to write me one. Now, some advice I would give, because I sort of shift more on, at least in my high school career, I was more of a STEM kid. So for your STEM teacher, so for me, that'd be my chemistry teacher, just really, as long as you're interested in the subject, that makes it so much easier to sort of stay engaged in class and ask your teacher questions. Like you should, sorry, um, feel free to go in during lunch to ask questions if they have open office hours or after school even if it's briefly just to ask about the homework or maybe just an interesting question you have. It's important to start building a relationship with your teacher earlier on, especially if you, I mean, it might be rare, but some students have a teacher in like 9th or 10th grade, and then they will have them again in 11th or 12th grade. So if you have one of those teachers and you sort of hit it off with them, that might be a great idea to sort of think about getting a letter of rec from them. So that means just, like I said earlier, just really engaging with them, engaging their class, but also engaging with them themselves. For the other teacher, even though I was more of a STEM person, I still was able to get a letter of recommendation from my English teacher because I personally really struggled with English. So there was a lot of, even though I wasn't much of a humanities kid, there was a lot of revisions, especially in essays, and there was some makeup work. So obviously, it depends on the teacher if they do have those opportunities for you to engage with them outside of class, but even in class. But for me, my advice for some of our younger kids, especially underclassmen, just start thinking about in general what subjects you think you're going to get your letter of recommendation from, and also which teachers, and start early on, just in the back of your mind, just start thinking about how you're going to build like a longer relationship with this teacher so they can get to know you well enough to write that letter of recommendation.
All right, that's some great advice. So, overall, looking back, what would you do differently in high school? school, if anything? And do you have any advice for these younger students on just not having any regrets about anything at the end of their high school?
Ooh, that's a tough one, but let's see. Probably one of my biggest somewhat regrets is maybe not committing to certain extracurriculars early enough in in my high school career. I well, I stuck to clubs like cross country, which I'm very happy about. Especially I joined Science Olympiad pretty late on because I was jumping between like speech and debate and like other lunch clubs. I wasn't quite sure where I fit, and it's really important to explore, especially in your beginning few years, to figure out where you fit. But make sure at some point, like I said earlier, to sort of sit yourself down and think about what exactly you want to do. You may not know, but maybe if you just commit to one or two activities, you can then have a better picture of whether or not you fit in well enough to do that for the next 4 years of your life. Um, for me, I might have jumped around a little too much between different activities that I wasn't sure if I was going to commit to, and that can lead to wasted time. Um, yeah, so just keep that in mind. Another regret I have is definitely related to, I mean, everybody procrastinates, right? So it's a great idea to sort of, as each class goes on, maintain those good study habits. Make sure before leaving a chapter, you know it well enough that you have a strong foundation for the next few. And if you're not, take some extra time to study for it. That way you'll even save time for the AP exam. You won't have to review everything in like a week before the exam. Um, but not procrastinating is very difficult. But if you sort of, even if you just sit yourself down, set like a 15-minute timer and just write down maybe plans for even longer projects, you'll get a clear picture of what you have to do and you won't sort of leave things to the last minute like I did. Because I I regret, especially in my freshman year, staying up so late, so often. Like I would stay up until like 2 a.m. doing lab reports. It's not worth it. Your health is definitely more important, and your grade is going to be just fine, but just shift things a little earlier, basically. That's my recommendation.
All right. So some more great advice. But one more question. What are some of your plans for the future, like beyond Yale? Do you have any as of now?
So this was something I was deeply considering in my senior year, especially applying to college when I had to think about a major because I mean, the good thing about Yale is that I'm not committed to any major. So even if I went and I decided maybe computer science and psychology wasn't a good fit for me, I could switch to like biology, engineering, or maybe even something completely different like music, you know? So in that case, I'm very fortunate because it's very flexible. But during my college application journey, I didn't know I was going to Yale. And a lot of schools they probably have like other like subdivisions of maybe like different colleges that you have to stay in between after you apply. So one of the biggest concerns for me was whether or not I should apply to schools of engineering or schools of arts and sciences. That was very difficult because I had to think about what I wanted to do in the future past college with these degrees. Did I want to be an engineer? Did I want to go into the medical field? Did I want to go into computer science? I wasn't quite sure. And to this day, I'm not too sure. When I was applying for college, I was stuck between wanting to go into psychology and then I was thinking of psychiatry. And now I'm thinking of computer science. So there's a lot of fields, but I'm fortunate enough now to have the flexibility in my university to be able to sort of give myself an extra 2 years to really explore and talk to the employment department at school to figure out exactly what I want to do in the future. Right now, I'm looking toward applying to medical school, possibly for psychiatry, but I'm not sure yet. So we'll have to see.
All right. So one more last question. How were you able to prepare for the ACT, SAT, and even AP exams? Or did you prepare intensively? Did you kind of skim over your notes? Like how did you prepare?
That's a great question. So in my school, we took the SAT. Um, I was sort of stubborn at first. I didn't want to take it because standardized testing is a very controversial process, right? Especially with how um, unfair it can be, especially if you look at maybe marginalized populations that have worse SAT scores. It's not only based on how hard they study, but I came around toward college application season, and you realize that especially for the elite colleges, an SAT score can be very helpful. So because I held off on doing it for a very long time. So the only experience I had up until my junior year was taking the PSAT. I took it. My school made me take the PSAT every year since I think it was seventh grade. Um, but in 11th grade, in March, we had a mandatory SAT session. So I just went in. Um, Actually, I did not just go in. 2 weeks before the SAT testing date, I locked myself up in my school's library and I went on Khan Academy. Um, the SAT might be changing. I think it's next year, 2024. But for the old one, I just went in and I grinded through so many problems, so many. My main focus was English because that was hardest for me. So I did a lot of English sets to the point where if there were like 9 questions in a set, I would get 9 right consistently with maybe like one wrong occasionally. Um, and I just kept going at it. There's great videos on Khan Academy too, like not just problems, but explaining how to do it. That was the main thing that was good for me. Um, but I would recommend you start earlier on than me because I only had started studying 2 weeks prior to my SAT testing date. I had to stop everything. Like I had to stop all my extracurriculars and all my schoolwork, even like my homework, just to lock myself in the library to grind through all those problems to get my score high enough. Um, my just for reference, my PSAT score was probably in the 1300 range, and by the time I was done studying, after I took my SAT, I got a 1520. So it was quite a marginal jump. Um, but just please start studying early. There's books now, there's tons of resources. But I think the most important thing is just to do the problems to get yourself acquainted with the format. Yeah. So, and then talking about AP exams. Um, I did not know about AP testing prep books early enough in my high school journey to use them a lot, but I probably 11th grade is when I was comfortably using them, and it was amazing. You reading through the book might not be the most important, especially if you're on a time crunch. So for me, because I procrastinate like we all do, so I just went through the questions at the back of each chapter, and then at most, to be honest, I would go through like one um, AP, like a full exam, like a full mock exam. And then if your teachers at school provide one that you can go in on like a Saturday to take, that's great too. Um, but just to get yourself, like the SAT, acquainted with the format, ace the questions, the knowledge sort of just comes to you, especially through practice. It will cement itself into your brain. And that's how AP tests sort of went by somewhat well for me. I'm just gonna reveal my scores right now. On average, I get a 4 on most exams. I didn't get many 5s, and there were a few 3s, so I'm not the best AP studier, but definitely just grinding through the problems and making sure you just leave time. Like start studying early. Like maybe after one unit you study in class, do the problems just for that unit. You can even just do 20. As long as you do it throughout the year, you'll be okay. Instead of having to do like I remember for Calc BC or AP Calculus BC, I I couldn't focus at home because I would just find myself scrolling on my phone on like YouTube or something. So I would force myself to go outside if it was like the park, the library, anywhere. And one day, like maybe a week before my exam, actually maybe 3 days before my exam, I just opened like a McGraw-Hill book. It was titled like 500 questions to study for your Calc BC exam. I had the goal of finishing all of those. I ended up only going through 300, but I went through all 300, and I was able to get a 5 in Calculus BC because of that. So doing the questions is really important, and just making yourself do it. So that's my greatest advice for standardized testing.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I wish I knew that before I took my AP exams, but it's always room for us to grow. So that kind of concludes all of my questions now. We'll move on. Hopefully, the audience has any questions. If you do, please type them in the chat and I'll definitely ask Kevin, or even just unmute if you have chance. So,
Oh, sorry, Max, we can't hear you.
oh, yeah, sorry. So, what all right. So, what kind of community service did you do in high school?
Oh, okay. Most of my community service probably came from, I haven't talked about it a lot, but the club I was leading, the Mental Health Awareness Club, we were partnered with several nonprofit organizations actually, but the one we worked with the most was probably Bring Change to Mind, or BC2M. Um, that was my main source of community service because I was really passionate about it. Me and my best friend Victoria, we led the club, we fought hard through it, and we were passionate about mental health, especially after COVID. It was very difficult to sort of handle all this anxiety and stress, especially when you're not physically with everybody. So growing out of the pandemic, we made sure there were weekly club meetings with crafts to do. And especially big events are great in school and they look great on paper to make sure you have a great impact. So on your I guess it's not called a brag sheet, extracurriculars, the Common App and the UC application will give you maybe like 2 to 3 sentences per activity for you to write about it. But if you just put in like a number, like, I don't know, like invited 1,000 students into the auditorium for a whole day for like mental health assemblies and activities. That number looks big and it looks great, right? But it's very difficult. Like, don't get me wrong, to lead an event that big. But that's mainly most of my community service was only in my school, which is probably a little bit unorthodox, right? Most people have like community service outside too, but really most of mine came from my work within my school and supporting my fellow students. I got sorry, I have a direct chat message, so I'm just going to read it really quickly. For Eric, about your recommendation letters, I'm not sure what a prog teacher is, but having one from a physics teacher and a personal finance teacher is still great. They're from two different subjects, even though they might, oh, okay, I see now. Yeah, no, it's great. Even though they may be STEM related, it's still really good because they're still pretty different subjects. So your college application readers are going to have a wide enough view of you. So that's perfect. And then I was asked if I did any internships. So I never did any paid internships or even unpaid internships. Um, but there was one summer I just joined like a health sciences, I think it's called health science immersion program. Um, my school is sponsoring it, so I just decided to join and just hear about all the health sciences. That sort of got me interested in the medical field and made me realize it was possible. But an internship is great. Please do it, especially if you know earlier on in your college, in your high school career, what kind of field you want to go into. But for me, I didn't really know, so it was sort of hard to get a starting point for finding an internship. So I never had that, and it's okay if you don't have it, but it's great if you do. Okay, back to you, Max.
Yeah. All right. So the next question is how many and what AP courses at North Hollywood Highly Gifted Magnet did you take?
That's a great idea. A great question. Let's see. I think I took, so my freshman year, I took two, and then every year after that, I took five exams. Um, so I guess that would add up to 17, right? So I took 17 AP classes. I'm very fortunate that my program offers a lot, but you don't need the most number of AP classes. Colleges they don't compare you to, they compare you to students from other schools, but they keep in mind your situation. So in your high school, how many AP classes are offered and, on average, how many are taken? And they also question if you're sort of pushing yourself to take those more advanced classes, especially in subjects you're interested in, like your anticipated major. So I took a 17's a lot. But if you just had to name any AP, I have probably taken it. And there are also a lot of my peers from NoHo who have taken more APs than me. Like I didn't take AP European History or AP Music Theory. I didn't take those classes, but I took the three major sciences: biology, chemistry, physics, um, and just a lot of courses to sort of push myself, but also a wide variety to figure out what subjects I might be into. For example, there was a point in my life where I thought maybe I would want to go into engineering. I still ponder about it sometimes, but that's what sort of pushed me to take AP Physics C instead of AP Physics 1. And AP Physics C was the one of the hardest courses I have ever taken in my life. But I think it really helped me probably look like a little bit more of a competitive applicant, especially in my program where a lot of students are taking the same class. But um, but yeah, every school is different, so it doesn't matter too much.
All right. So the next question which one is better, taking an AP class and getting a B, or taking a regular, just normal CP class and getting an A?
Okay. Um, so the thing about my program is that we don't have too many opportunities to sort of step down from the AP level, but my counselor would tell you, and I would recommend, if you were gonna get a B in an AP class, I would say like go for the AP class. If it was a C, then definitely don't. A B, it might sound bad. It may sound bad. And if you want to like get valedictorian or keep your record like clean, if you have straight A's, feel free to like not take the AP. But personally, I think the colleges also appreciate seeing that effort put into an AP level class, even if you get a B, because one B or like two Bs aren't gonna kill your admissions chances. It's not it's not a huge deal. So yeah.
All right. So the next question is could you share your summer camp in high school? Or, yeah.
Um, I didn't, especially because of COVID, I didn't have that many summer internships or summer camps. My school doesn't provide its own summer camp, and the only one I went to is the one I mentioned earlier. I don't quite remember which year it was. I'm pretty sure it was probably the summer of my 10th or 11th grade. I'm gonna say 10th grade. Just the health sciences immersion program. Just if you know somewhat the direction or what subjects you're like interested in, search up summer opportunities for that, even if it's a cold email to like a lab, like from CSUN or something, um, if you're interested in bio, go for it. I personally did not, like I said earlier, I didn't really have a direction that early on, so I wasn't able to have many summer opportunities.
All right. So another chat question. So did you miss any classes due to cross country competitions at school, and how did you manage?
That is a great question because I almost forgot about that. For cross country, I did skip classes once a week. I skipped my fifth and sixth periods, the last two classes. just for some context, some other schools might be different, but my school only takes 6 classes per day, and it's the same 6 classes. So I would skip. Usually, I remember this past year, it was like psychology and my service period. Um, I had an extra period, so I did TA service in the college center this past year. So those were the 2 classes I would skip. Other years, I usually skipped something that wasn't too intensive, like English, psychology, service, PE. I would skip classes like that. And that's just because I would sort of talk to my counselor in the beginning of the year to sort of try to place those lighter workload classes that would be a little more forgiving on my fifth and sixth period. So I would be able to sort of not have to take them on cross country meet days. But something very important is talking with your teacher, especially in that scenario, because some teachers may not like it if you have to skip class. But if it's for something like cross country, a lot of them are understanding, and it's a great opportunity to even just get a chance to talk to your teacher, show them that you have other extracurricular commitments, but you value staying on top of that class and the classwork, and you can ask your teacher like when you can make up the classwork or if there's any other work you can do, and they sort of like to know that you're eager to sort of stay involved. So that's what I did.
Okay, I see another question in the chat. So, is it a must-have to get a national slash state level award in order to get into like a top school?
Um, so I mean, in my example, clearly it's not because I don't have any like national, international um, medals or awards. I know a lot of people from my school, they do like science bowl or quiz bowl or any other of those competitive extracurricular activities, and they will get like top marks, especially in a lot of Olympiads, like chemistry Olympiad, biology the Olympiad. Tons of people in my school are great at those, and they get like national and even international recognition. And that's amazing. But personally, I didn't have any of that. Possibly due to because I wasn't too attached to like biology or chemistry. I didn't really fall in love with them. Um, but yeah, you don't need those international medals or awards to sort of make up for that. You don't necessarily have to make up for that, but just bring out your strengths in other areas, like through community service or your values, or even just your personal hobbies and how you like to live your life. Bring out your other leadership roles, or like for example for me leading my club at school or helping other kids in science olympiad like with woodworking, teaching the next generation of kids how to start machining. That was really big for me, so that's what I committed my time to instead every day after school, instead of having to study for like maybe a big award, right? Or a test. Both are great paths, but as long as you're making good use of your time outside of the classroom, you're going to be just fine. Colleges just want to know what you're doing outside of class.
Okay, well, I don't see anything in the chat that's in like the main chat. Kevin, if you don't see anything as like a direct message to you, I have one personal question for you. But
All right. Sorry. Yeah. Feel free to do. Yeah. What's the question then?
all right, so I know that Yale has the interview, obviously. So did you do any preparation for that? And overall, I know you went over it a little bit, but how do you think it went? And kind of what was the overall like basis of the interview?
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this, because when I was applying to college, I had I don't know. I might have thought that the interview was just a made up thing and it was like stereotypical. Like I knew it existed, but it seems so fantasy like that. I thought it only happened in movies, to be honest. Um, so I got my interview request from a alumni who is working in Los Angeles right now, and I was really shocked at first, and I was really confused. So um after I got that request, I'm just gonna go through the whole process in general, how it went. I got that request on email. Um, and the issue was that my interviewer was leaving the country to go on vacation with her family. I think it was like in 2 weeks or so in January. And the issue with my schedule didn't line up with hers because I had a science Olympiad competition, and my school has a pretty small team. So I was one of the only members on build who knew the ins and outs of most of the build events. So I didn't feel comfortable leaving the Science Olympiad competition for my Yale interview. Personally, if I could do it again, I would probably just take the like explain to the Science Olympiad team that I couldn't make it and just take my interview. But I ended up emailing my interviewer like late at night, and I was like, I'm so sorry, but I really can't make it to this date that you have offered me because of my prior commitment in Science Olympiad. And I suggested another date, and thankfully she was able to match that. It was a weekday after school, which is good for me because um, yeah, you might not know this, but when you're doing an interview, the school only tells the alumni interviewer what school you, sorry, Yale only tells the alumni interviewer what high school you go to. They don't tell them your address or anything like that. So my interview was in person. A lot of the rest of my interviews were all online, but my Yale one was in person, and that was also probably a big reason of why I decided to go to Yale. Um, I like in-person meetings. It speaks to me. But anyways, we had it in a Starbucks just next to my school, and um, my interviewer, she was still willing to meet with me even after the reschedule. So I'm very grateful for that. Um, but leading up to the interview, how I prepared, I I searched up on Google like how to prepare for a Yale interview. It sounds stereotypical, but I promise it works. I think there was like a College Vine article. There were also some other ones. Yale itself, we have a video series on YouTube from like 2014 on outlining the interview process, but also the whole application process. If you want some more recent advice, I'd recommend going to like Spotify or like Apple Music and pulling up I think there's like a Yale application podcast. It's amazing. It's really good. Um, they just listen to it. It's applicable to every school. You don't have to only be interested in Yale to listen to it. You could like, I don't know. It applies to all the schools with the common application process, basically. And from that, I wrote down a lot of the common questions that were recommended to study for. So obviously in an interview, they're always going to ask like, tell me about yourself is the first question. And generally how a college interview goes is from tell me about yourself. They go off of points you mentioned, like the extracurricular activities you do, your hobbies, and that's how sort of they guide it. But they also have like common questions, like how would your friends describe you in 3 adjectives? So I wrote down a bunch of those questions in Google Doc, and I just wrote down my answer, and I was just practicing on paper. Please also practice saying it out loud so you get used to saying it, obviously. But now that I think about it, my approach was sort of similar to how I studied for the SAT. It was a lot of just collecting questions and then answering the questions beforehand. So I sort of become acquainted with how the format was going to be like. And I think that really helped me. In the end, um, my preparation Yale College interview document was like 19 pages, so I may have overdone it, but you know, if you really like a school, that's what you'll do, right? So I'm sure a lot of you will do the same. And the other important thing is just make sure you read up enough about the school. So for me, I just learned about Yale's traditions, how their academics worked out. So I looked like and so the interviewer would know that I was interested enough that I researched about the school beforehand. It's important to show your interest. Like if you're interested, don't be afraid to show it, right? So that's how I prepared for my interview.
All right. Well, so I don't have any other questions and I don't see any in the chat. So I'll just wait a little bit, see if any more pop up. And yeah, we are
All
at
right. Mhm.
8 o'clock. So, well, actually, I think it says 8:01, but I think we might end the meeting soon. But first, let's wait for some Any
All right.
last minute questions?
I hope I gave enough insightful advice. I sort of just was rambling the whole time, but I hope it helps everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
got a question real quick.
oh, yeah.
Hey Kevin. So, I came in kind of late, sorry, but I don't think I heard. You might have said it already, but I know you talked about like your mental health awareness club a lot. And I was just wondering, aside from all the academics like the SAT, APs, uh, what do you think was your highest achievement, like extracurricular wise?
Ah, that is. I think it probably would be my mental health awareness club simply because of the amount of leadership it takes to pull that off. I worked with the social workers in my school, that department, because the social workers are very busy, like dealing with actual emergencies and talking with students and making sure everybody's doing well. And they don't have the time to sort of outreach to the whole school about these issues and make sure that sort of awareness is made. So for me and my friends who sort of led this club, that was probably my biggest accomplishment. Every year, we would do like yoga sessions and a lot of these big school-wide events, and they're very hard to pull off, especially when you need to get them passed through like by ASB and the vice president and then the sorry the vice principal and then the principal. It becomes very difficult. So I one of my supplemental essays was about going through that process and just committing myself to it, and that was probably my biggest extracurricular. Um, and I mean, the Yale admissions office probably knows, especially from cross country, that I have a limited amount of time, because cross country itself is very time intensive. And but cross country was definitely not like my main extracurricular. Like it took the most amount of time, but I don't have any running awards or anything. I'm not like extremely athletic, I'm just madly like I like to run, but I'm not particularly tall, so I'm not the fastest. So if I had to say, basically, my leading extracurricular that I cared the most about was probably my own mental health awareness club. And then Science Olympiad and cross country was the other two activities that took the rest of the time. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And then just one more question, sorry. When did you start the club again?
Um, the club was originally, I didn't found the club, but it had a different name, and um I was in freshman year. I was a part of the club under a different name. It's called OMM. And when the president was graduating in my sophomore year, I took over. Me and the then club members. So the leadership really started in my sophomore year.
All right. So, if there's any more last minute questions, please feel free to unmute and ask or type it in the chat.
I see everybody's messages in the chat. I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Um, all right. So, it seems like there's no more questions. So, big thanks to you, Kevin, for, you know, giving your time to kind of spread some knowledge and give advice to everyone. And just thank you so much. And, the best of wishes to your upcoming college life and career beyond Yale. So, thank you
Of
so
course.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, Max, for the opportunity to speak with everybody. I hope I gave some insightful advice. And I also wanted to thank Cheer and everybody who helped make this possible. I really do appreciate it. And you're doing amazing work for the community. I hope you remember that.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone who was able to attend tonight. And we'll see you guys soon, I guess. So, I will now stop recording and boop, there we go.